You're listening to The Hypnotic Empath, and I'm your host, Robin Holm. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, a body talk practitioner, and an empowered empath with over 2 decades of experience helping sensitive souls like you reconnect with your power. This podcast is a space for deep healing, subconscious transformation, and real-world support. We'll do some guided hypnotherapy sessions, we'll talk to some incredible guests, and we'll help you learn to release what isn't yours, to protect your energy, and to finally feel safe being you. It's time to move from surviving to thriving. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Hypnotic Empath. I am your host, Robin Holm, and I am joined here today with a guest I am so excited to share with you. She is one of my favorite people. Her name is Becca Roses, and Becca is the founder of Mind Body Genes. It's an epigenetics-based wellness company that helps people unlock their unique blueprint for health and longevity. She's an epigenetics coach, a trainer, and an educator who created the Gene Queen certification to help wellness professionals integrate genetic blueprints into their practice. Becca, welcome and thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited too. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself for those of us that don't know you.
Yeah, absolutely. You did such a great job teeing me up. So my name is Becca. I am, along with all of those things that Robin mentioned, I'm also a mom of three. I'm in my now late 30s. But yeah, I've been doing epigenetics since 2020 is when I started my training process. Had a background in learning and development before that. So I decided to marry my two passions of wellness and learning and development and create the certification course and help people understand how they're wired.
What got you interested in genetic blueprints in the first place? How did you find
Yeah.
genetic blueprints?
Yep. It was my own health journey, as many of us do, get on our own health journey and try to figure out everything about ourselves. And so it actually was something I stumbled upon because I had gone through the long years of testing and not finding anything wrong, even though I knew that I had things going on with me after I had my daughter, my third kid, and really wanted to heal, like wanted to have more energy, wanted to feel like myself again, but kept on hitting roadblocks with practitioners and lots of expensive testing, lots of time, lots of supplements, lots of diets, lots of things. Then I ended up finding epigenetics and learning that, oh, there's actually a blueprint to how we are wired that can allow you to tune back into yourself and learn what you actually need instead of listening to everyone else, which we will definitely get into on this show.
Okay. What is the difference between epigenetics and genetics?
Yeah, that's a great question. Genetics is your static DNA. So it is literally the SNPs that we all have inside of us, and we all contain them. So we all have these different things like COMT and MTHFR. But the epigenetics is actually how your environment plays with those genes. And so everything from what you eat, what you listen to, who you interact with, the toxin exposure, the things that you take for your supplements, the medications that you take, the air you breathe, all of it plays with your genes and whether or not they turn on or turn off. So that's epigenetics versus the static genetics.
So when somebody gets their genetic blueprint done with you, are they getting both?
Yeah, they're getting both. They're learning exactly what their unique code is, so which variants of those particular genes they have, but also because they're coming into it with lived experience. They're coming into this whole journey with here's what I have been through and here's my story and here are my goals. They're actually getting it through the epigenetic lens. So all of our panels are based on lifestyle factors, nutrition, supplements, sleep, toxins, hormones, all the things that we interact with every single day.
So they'll get the report and it'll say, these are your genetic SNPs. Therefore, this is what you should do about it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And they always get, and it's not just paper. So it's like, yes, you can get, your genetic report anywhere these days, right? But what's unique is having someone that's been trained on how to interpret that, walk you through what that means. Because without the human coaching element, which is why I train practitioners on how to do it, you could be looking at a paper and go, oh, okay, I shouldn't have issues with histamine, yet it's bothering me every day, right? And then you could get really confused. So then you need the coaching along with it. And that's what we do. Every single time somebody gets a blueprint, they automatically get the interpretation.
That's really valuable. I've had my genetics run at least 3 or 4 times over the
Mhm.
years because when I was on my really long fertility journey and trying to figure out what the heck was keeping me from getting pregnant, at the time, my naturopath ran the MTHFR test for me. First time I'd ever heard about it. This is probably back in 2009. Getting your genetics run, maybe 23andMe would have been an option, which I would have
Mhm.
discovered shortly after that. But that was my first introduction into the fact that my genetics could be predisposing me to needing certain things and not needing others. So that was really fascinating. And I have had my genetics run with you, and
Mhm.
having that personal interpretation was really great because even bringing up this histamine thing, on paper, I should not have problems with histamine. My genetics say I am not predisposed to having problems with histamine. Yet, I've had mast cell activation syndrome, which is now managed, but in the past, nobody knew what was going on with me. I tend to really flare histamine wise, but yet my genetics do not say that. And when I
Yep.
said this to you, Beck, I was like, why on earth do I have problems with histamine when my genetics say that I shouldn't? You had a very good answer for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it does come down to the way that we handle and manage stress through what we call our COMT status. And so this one is one that I found out about early on in my journey. Dr. Ben Lynch talks about it. There's a lot of people that talk about this status, and it's not just about the histamines or your environmental sensitivity. It's how your body is coping with stress. Because when we clear stress chemicals slowly or too quickly, that can throw everything out of whack and cause your system to basically turn on genes that shouldn't be an issue for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that that's definitely was the case for me. And just because I feel stress very acutely, I
Hmm.
find that it's hard for me to clear stress hormones. And I remember when I was trying to get pregnant, I would often, and even after I had my baby, it makes me think about after Blake was born. And he would wake up in the night and I'd have to go get up and go feed him. And then afterwards, I would be staring at the ceiling for an hour before I could fall back to sleep. And I realized through looking at my genetics, for me personally, it's because I clear stress hormones really slowly.
Yeah.
So I would get the big jolt of adrenaline and I was on such high alert all the time. I had waited for such a long time to have this baby. And I found myself in a constant state of fight or flight after he was born. And my COMT status was not helping.
Yeah, yeah, you're what we consider there's three types. And so you're somebody that has a below average stress recovery, and your stress COMT phenotype is actually what we call a worrier. There's the worrier, and there's the warrior, and there's also the mediator. And so those three types, with your type, you hold on to stress longer. And as an empath, that can feel very heavy because you're processing not only your stress, but others around you. Hence, when you had your baby and you were like, okay, I'm having to take care of this other human, you're getting all of that.
Mhm. Yeah, I was so worried all the time, worried. And that worry was just, it felt ever present all of the time. What are some of the things you can tell us about those three types and people might recognize themselves in the description?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it is a big picture thing. It's a huge player. Either you can have slow clearance, and that makes you in the worrier type, and you tend to be a lot more sensitive to other people's energy. If you are the warrior type, it's not necessarily the good or better label to be. Honestly, they're all very uniquely their own. You tend to have a faster clearance of stress chemicals, means you're usually more steady under pressure, but those types do need more stimulation to feel engaged because they're constantly clearing stress chemicals. So you can actually have, kind of the opposite of that. And if you're an empath and you have that, then imagine like how many people's energies you're constantly taking on and how much pressure you're constantly taking on and clearing out. You almost start seeking more of it. We talk a lot about being addicted to stress. And when I'm the mediator, so I can go either way. When I'm operating more as a warrior type and clearing stress quickly, I'm looking for more stress. My subconscious is trying to find more stress because I'm addicted to it. Because otherwise, how else am I going to get the dopamine? How else am I going to get that? I'm clearing it out so quickly. I need more of it. So you can really identify with especially as a mediator like myself, you can identify with both in different seasons of your life depending on what's going on.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. So how does that play into you? I know when you and I were speaking before, you identify as an empath.
I do. Yeah, I really do. And I didn't find that out really until I was an adult. After I had kids. I mean, honestly, in my 30s was probably around the time I met you, was when I found out like, oh, I am an empath because I have always felt emotions and energy very deeply. And it wasn't until we really started working together that I was like, oh, okay, that actually resonates with how I felt my entire life. And then because I had already been working with the genetics, I went back into my panels and I was like, with this new lens of this helps me to understand exactly why my body feels the way it does when I am under a lot of stress or nervous system pressure.
Hmm. That is so helpful. It's funny because I did not figure out that I was an empath until I was in my mid 30s either. Because I'm incredibly extroverted, I didn't identify as an empath because I just thought empaths meant you have a hard time being around people and you're super sensitive. I'm also not an incredibly emotional person. As I've discovered, though, through working with hundreds and hundreds of empaths, that's not the definition at all. That may be a tiny fraction of it. But in my definition, empathy, or we all have empathy, of course, but being an empath is when you have a super sensitive ability to pick up on the stimulus from your environment. So you're able to pick up with all of your senses the way other people are feeling and experiencing, and then we tend to put a big pressure on ourselves because we can feel where other people are coming from and because we can put ourselves into other people's shoes so easily. We tend to feel a responsibility to then fix it. So if we
Mhm.
notice it, we tend to then feel like we need to fix it. So we can really get into a lot of people pleasing. And it often goes back to our childhood where we could sense when something was off. And as long as everybody was good, then we were safe.
Yeah.
So it often goes back to that. And I think that when you think about the worrier slash warrior and then the mediator in between, as a kid, would have always been worrying about everybody else's safety. That was a really big one for me. So I was
Yes.
always worrying about everybody else's safety and what if this happens and what if that happens. And in addition to that, I grew up on a farm. So there were a lot of like accidents and,
Mhm.
animals and things that happened that really solidified that pathway in my brain. And it wasn't until I figured out that I was an empath that I was able to start putting in some protections for myself and able to discern what was my responsibility and what wasn't. What do you think of that?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it resonates so much. I mean, as a also fellow extrovert who probably had the same exact situation going on where like, oh no, I can't be an empath. Like I'm such a like I'm just so outward, right? But no, I mean that was my way of expressing it and growing up with as the oldest of five, growing up as somebody who was parentified really young, I can automatically tell you, yes, I was fluctuating between, young little Becca was so much of a worrier. And then she also, when she got older, fluctuated to be the warrior because I'm a mediator. And I was like, oh no, as long as I'm okay and we just power through this, everybody will be okay. So that's what I got to do. I have to white knuckle it. So I could see myself, I can just look back with the lens of compassion about, oh, wow, that is exactly how you operated and why. And now with the tools we have, it's so much easier for me to go through life and realize, okay, that is not my responsibility or my job to make sure that other people are okay outside of making sure my kids are okay, right? But even then, like let them feel, and it's not your job to like be responsible for them, especially having teenagers and preteens in the house now. It's like they're going through their own journey. So as a mother, as an empath mother, which is hilarious, I meant to tell you this, my son, he's 14 now, I was talking about being an empath and he goes, and I let him listen to your podcast and your hypnosis and he loved it. And he was like, empath, I've never heard that word. It sounds like a magical like woodland creature. And I was like, well, yeah, we are.
Oh.
It was really funny.
And isn't it interesting to think about for you and me to think about growing up with the bubble of protection and how different that would be? And I
Yeah.
know when I'm doing hypnotherapy with people, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. So when we are healing the young wounds, we often go back to a certain age which would be the root of whatever belief system or pattern we're trying to reprogram. And what I'll usually do when I take somebody back, whether they're 3 or 5 or 14, first of all, we have to let that little self know whatever's going on is not your fault. This is not your fault. You are not responsible. And then we put a bubble of protection around them, always, every single time. And because the subconscious doesn't know the difference between yesterday, today, and tomorrow, if we go back to you at 3 years old and we give you a bubble of protection at 3 years old, you are now today living as a human who's had a bubble of protection since they were 3 years old. So that's
Yeah.
how it works to rewire the brain. And it's fascinating to think about literally giving our kids a bubble of protection right now. And
Yeah.
I've done that with my kids as well. And my youngest was out with her nanny, and her stroller was hit by a vehicle. She's
Mm.
fine. I will just say that right now. But she was thrown from the vehicle onto the from the stroller onto the pavement, and she only received bruises and scrapes. And when I
Wow.
talked with her about it afterwards, she was like, "Yeah, mommy, I bounced." So she talked about being in her
Mm.
bubble. And so we reinforced that. And it was really important for me as a worrier to know that I remind my kids of the bubble of protection every day. I'll say, you're going to have a really great day today. Remember your bubble. And especially my little one, she's always like, "Yeah, mom, I know. Like, how many times
Mm.
can you mention this?" Because it's already in there for her, but it makes me feel better as a worrier. And it really showed me that with that bubble of protection, even though bad things happen, worrier, even though bad things happen, my children are still safe and protected. That could have been really bad, and it wasn't. It wasn't her time to go, and the bubble of protection kept her safe. So I think that's important as the worrier, because I go into worst case scenario all the time and I have to really pull my brain back. And making some of the changes that I've made through knowing my epigenetics has helped me to be able to really rein in that worrier propensity. Because when my blood sugar is dysregulated, I worry way more. When I
Mm.
haven't had enough protein, I'm way more anxious. If I haven't slept well, anxiety and worry. So, could you speak to how people could use their genetic blueprint to figure out how to really bolster whether they're a worrier or a warrior?
Yeah. The big thing is with that is that not only learning about that one specific SNP, but everything else in the report too, with the thousands of SNPs we look at. Because one thing that empaths all have in common, right, is decision making can become really, really hard for us because we are constantly taking in a lot of noise from others. And so it's hard for us, especially before we start to work on the subconscious mind, it's really hard for us to tune that out, right? And so your genetics, along with your COMT status, can help you know when to pause, can help you know when to reset. It can also help you to just literally learn what it is that you need, whether that be what do I eat? What kind of supplements do I take? How should I move my body? So that when you learn that and you integrate it and you put it into yourself, you really resonate with it, you really feel it, you're no longer having to listen to everyone else's opinions or what works for everyone else, because we live in an age where you can see that any time you open your phone, you open an app, you get on social media, people are doing things that work for them, and that is beautiful. But sometimes especially when you're an empath, you may, I mean, I know this was me for sure throughout my entire, like from my teens all the way into my 20s, would try something new every month basically, because it's like, oh yeah, somebody said this was good, so like I want to try it. And it was never out of like anything malicious. It was just a thing that I did because I was constantly seeking outside of myself until I truly learned how to tune back into myself and figure out what it is that I truly needed.
That is so huge. And so, what kind of diet? Because I also work a lot with weight loss and metabolism. I have for the
Mm-hmm.
last 22 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the diets, quote unquote, or eating styles? I don't know what
Yeah.
you'd like to call it, that you cover in the genetics?
Yeah, the whole gamut. From the beginning, the nutrition panels are so helpful because it tells you how your body uniquely processes all of the macronutrients. So, protein, carbohydrates, fats, and then all the different types of fats. So, we can literally see from the genetics whether or not carnivore, keto, paleo, more Mediterranean style, higher complex carb, higher fat, what types of fats, higher protein, lower protein. We can see what actual style would be best for you. And that's so helpful because most of the time we are following the trends, right? And sometimes what is currently trending is actually really good for that person based on their genetics. And it just happens to be something they stumble upon. That's great. But a lot of the times, for somebody like myself, if I was following a full blown keto diet and eating a lot of saturated fats, that would be working against my genes because I don't do well with a lot of saturated fats. I do better with incorporating more of a Mediterranean style of paleo, still very high protein, but a lot more complex carbs than simple carbs and not a lot of saturated fats.
Mhm. I found that fascinating because through a process of elimination, have
Mhm.
come to a carnivore diet. I've been on the carnivore diet for almost a year now. That is super extreme for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I had to really be able to work through my feelings that if ever there was anything wrong, the answer was always more vegetables, more vegetables. It took me so long to figure out that actually the vegetables for my body were what were causing all of my digestive issues, which was wild.
Yeah.
But when I looked at my genetics, I already knew that I had problems with my blood sugar. And my
Mhm.
genetics showed that, yes, I need to be on a more low carb diet and I can do saturated fat. So that's good too. So I had kind of figured that out over time. And then when I did my genetics, it just solidified that and
Confirmed it. Yeah.
it confirmed it for me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so do you find that when people learn about their genetics and they implement that stuff, does it help them with weight loss?
Yeah, it does. Usually, the first thing to go is inflammation, which translates to weight loss, usually for most women. And um, when you can couple that with stress techniques and nervous system support and all of that and the right micronutrients, a lot of them come to the table already in their 30s, 40s, and they're already doing everything. They usually come to me and they're like, okay, I'm doing everything right. And I'm like, well, let's peel back the layers on that a little bit because we don't know what's right for you yet. So you could be doing everything, but maybe half of it you don't need to be doing. And actually, that's stressing your system out a lot. I talked about this recently in my stories where when I stopped listening to everyone else's rules and I stopped doing the things that everybody else was saying you have to do, that's when I saw the biggest changes in myself. And I, between 2022 and now, have dropped about 40 pounds of inflammation just from making some simple tweaks and diving even deeper into my genetics. A lot of it had to do with stress and your work, Robin, because you honestly, I mean, that bubble of protection we put in, the inner child work, all the hypnosis sessions we had when I was in my most stressed state really helped me to integrate that. But I was also able to dive into my genes and learn, okay, even though I can work out really hard and you know, I have this propensity for elite strength and all of this, at the moment, because my nervous system was so fried, I was pushing myself into more inflammation. And I was also being very restrictive in my diet because of what other people were telling me. Well, you have Hashimoto's, you're stressed, you need to do this, you need to do that. I quit all of those things, literally quit going to the gym, quit doing my heavy strength workouts, started walking every day, doing hypnosis, quit being gluten free and dairy free. And I know for a lot of people that can feel so restrictive. For me, it was adding more stress because all of a sudden I was worried about what can I actually eat. Found myself diving more into a lot of processed things because it was like, well, what else am I supposed to eat? And then I realized, even with all of my knowledge I had about the genes, I was working against my body because I never looked at it through the lens of stress before. And now that I do, I take that to the table with all of my clients and I tell them, a lot of the times when we think and use the language, we're doing everything right. I'm doing everything. I'm not seeing results. It's a very big clue for us to stop doing a lot of those things.
And really, like, how do you know what to stop? Because I know for myself, when I think about my fertility journey, I was so terrified to stop
Mhm.
anything that I was doing in case that
Mhm.
meant that I wasn't going to get pregnant. And
Yeah.
I think that that's why working with a coach like you is so helpful because then it's that permission that we need to drop the things. And then after we find out, yes, we're allowed to let that go. I often find that inside there was a part of you that knew that. There's a part of
Absolutely.
you that was like, oh, I hate when I have to take this or that. But we can get really muddled in what our intuition is telling us, right? So,
Absolutely.
what would you say to our listeners who are struggling to get in touch with their own intuition?
Oh gosh, I would say it is going to be really important to step back. Like if I could go back and talk to my younger self, even 3, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, there's nothing wrong with you. That's number 1. Number 2 is with the right supports, you will be able to tune it back into your greatest strengths. But you have to stop listening to others around you. So if you find yourself seeking answers outside of yourself, you really do have to consciously stop it. You have to go, no, no more. I'm not going to, even if it sounds good to you, because sometimes we think, oh, that sounds really good because we're listening to somebody else's excitement instead
Mm,
of listening to our own. And so we actually get false excitement for something because someone else is excited about it. So you
yeah,
have to truly learn like what actually excites you, what actually lights you up.
I was going to say that's that whole mirror neuron effect that we, especially as an empath, when you can so easily put yourself into somebody else's shoes, that can be one of those things you're like, and I find for me that and I wonder how this is for you, Becca, but I find for me when I call it the click. When I hear something, I'm like, yep. So when I heard you for the first time on Liz Wolf's podcast years ago, and I was like, yep, I like that girl. She has something for me. I'm getting in
Mm-hmm.
touch. I felt
Yeah.
it inside of me. But you talked about like the false excitement, and that could be more of maybe that could be more of like, yeah, 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 and feeling like I need to do more and do more and do more. Whereas when I felt that click to work with you, it was just like an inner knowing. It was
Yeah.
just this solid feeling. What is it like for you when your intuition says yes?
It is. It's a gut response. It's a visceral gut response for me. And I knowing a lot about also my human design and Enneagram and things like that. These all can pair together really well. For me, it is not a floaty excitement. It is when I actually do know something. It is so grounded and rooted, almost like a sacral response. And that is something that I've had to learn to listen to. And I had to learn when I was an adult, like in my 30s, I learned it was not something I always knew. Um, but really figuring out what that is for you. I feel like most people will resonate with the fact that it's not generally the floaty excitement. That's usually a little bit false, right? Now, we can get really excited and outwardly excited about things. I tend to be that type of a person. But if it's a big decision or something that I need to make a yes or no decision on, it's usually that sacral response. And I do have a trick that I use and sometimes with my clients where I don't know if I ever told you about this. You may love this, but I will do this thing where if it's a big decision, it's like a really huge decision and I'm trying to figure out, what to do and I'm conflicted and I haven't got that click, I haven't got that sacral response yet. What I'll do is I'll say, "Okay, we are going to go about our day having made the decision this way." This way. Yes. Let's say it's a yes. And then we're going to pay attention to how our body and our mind and everything shows up throughout the entire day. And it could be, you could use it for big decisions, you can use it for small decisions. And then, okay, pay attention, take notes, journal about it, feel into yourself. Then do the opposite where you make the decision the other way. Maybe that's a no, right? And then you go about your day, your just everyday life, and figure out what that feels like for you. And usually, when you do that, almost like mirror or polarizing thing, you'll come out of those 2 days knowing which one was right because you'll be able to feel into that. And that's where you can usually train yourself to feel that click or feel that sacral response or feel that gut response.
That is really good. And that I think also speaks to that mediator part of you that you can live out a full day on either way, right? Let's try
Yes.
this out. And I think about when I'm sometimes talking with clients or even for myself, if they're, feeling really stressed about this one thing, I'm like, well, how would it feel to just cancel it? Just cancel it. And if they feel a relief, then that's the right thing. Or if they're like,
No,
oh, actually, that'd be really disappointing to cancel, then like that's your answer, right? Is that like
absolutely.
yeah. So I love that. But testing it further with something big, like I've made the decision this way. How would that feel? I love that. I think that's a really, really great tool. Do you use a lot of journaling?
I do. Yeah, I do a lot of journaling. Especially like if I feel like I mean, usually like everybody, if I have a lot going on at the moment that I feel like needs to be processed, that's when I do it. I implemented like the 5 minute journal for a little while because I feel like just the easy, quick things are awesome. Um, sometimes my note section in my phone, you would probably relate to. It's like a millions of notes. Like it's like I have a note for like ideas. I have a note for like, ooh, write about this one day. Like there's just constant things because then you're getting it out of yourself. You're getting it out and you're not just holding that all in. And that's another big thing I feel like for empaths is like making sure that we're not holding also our own junk in there too.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that speaking of that, what would be a few of the things that are good for stress relief for everybody's genetics?
Oh yeah. Number one, morning sunshine. No matter what your genes say, morning sunshine is something that can be incredibly healing and nourishing for so many genes. It upregulates a lot of genes on both sides of the spectrum, whether or not you're somebody that deals with high cortisol or low cortisol or a high stress response or low stress response. Your morning sunshine can really be helpful. I like to say as much skin as you can possibly get in the sun before 10 a.m. If it's at sunrise, that's even better. Even if you have to just roll your windows down in the car while you're driving to work, it's a beautiful thing. Um, that's my number one. My number two is, nourishment. And that one's a little nuanced because we have to figure out what that nourishment looks like for you. But honestly, slowing down because we do a lot of things really quickly. So when we talk about meals, a lot of us, when I'm looking at hunger and satiety genes, we have these SNPs that actually cause us to not feel full. And we deal with things like that. And now we're talking about, well, how do you take your meals? And it's usually, oh, it's over my counter, or it's at my desk, and I'm shoveling it into my mouth really fast and I'm forgetting to chew. If we can tweak that one thing, it usually results in better digestion, losing inflammation, losing weight. All of those things kind of go hand in hand. And then when you really start to peek into your specific SNPs, it helps with your satiety cues. It's really
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah, those are really great. What is your human design?
Manifesting generator.
Oh yeah, me too. That's
Yep.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
And do you know, like with your human design, what your eating environment is supposed to be?
Yes, it is not is definitely opposite of what I do sometimes, which is not going to be in front of a screen, not going to be it's actually like outside is best. So when I can take my lunch outside and I can eat in nature, it's even better. That's not always feasible, but it is great because I live in a very mild climate, so most of the year, unless it's so hot, I can sit on a patio, I can eat in my backyard, I can take my lunch outside. That's usually really great. What about yours?
Mine is the like quiet. I need absolute and complete quiet and nobody
Mm.
around me, which happens none of the times because so both my kids are generators. My husband's a manifesting generator. Our house is like crazy and busy and constant movement and noise. And I find it really hard to eat in that environment. If I go to meet a bunch of friends at a restaurant, for example, it's hard for me to actually eat food at the restaurant.
Too loud. Well,
It's
there's
too loud.
music
Yeah.
playing, there's
Oh,
talking. That's usually like something restaurants do on purpose is like create that ambiance and the buzz. And you're like, nope, that's not me. I need quiet. I need a library.
yeah, and then it makes me want to drink alcohol, right? Because I need to dull that noise.
Mm.
Being an empath, and in addition to that, it dulling that noise, alcohol does that. And so I find it hard anyway to eat in restaurants. And now I know
Oh,
why. So we're just talking
wow.
about human design, and I'll link to that in the show notes just because it's really
It's
interesting.
fun.
And yeah, it's just more stuff that you can learn about yourself. And I find
Yeah.
learning about myself and learning about other people endlessly fascinating, which is why I love what I do so much.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a reason why we all love the human design, the Enneagram, the personality quizzes online. I also look at the genes that exact way because there's no better way to learn how you're wired than those kind of things. Astrology, all of the things, like they really are so related. Because the more true we can be to ourselves, the more ourselves we can become. And that's when we can really tap into that inner knowing, but also the inner happiness. Because I know we've talked about that before, but when you can really upregulate and optimize, you just see a light turn on in people. You just see it. You see it in their eyes. You see it in the way they show up in the world. You see it in their confidence. And that is a beautiful thing.
It sure is. So, if people were to want to begin and to do, because I know you have a bunch of different genetic programs or panels that people
Hmm.
can do, what do you
Hmm.
recommend for most people just starting out right out of the gate?
Yeah, most people do really well learning about their foundational blueprint, which is going to tell them how they're wired for nutrition, supplementation, so micronutrients, how they detox, because that's a huge one, sleep, exercise, and hormones. So that's our standard blueprint. And then I did create one within the last year that is called Age Like a Badass. And that one is really fantastic for people that kind of feel like they already have a handle on a lot of the foundational pieces, but they want to know how to really optimize for longevity and healthy aging. And that one I love because it dives deeper into the stress phenotype. It dives into some of the longevity tools, some of the longevity markers like cold plunging, heat shock protein. So, how we respond to saunas. It also goes into some detox and some sleep in there too. So, you get a really good full picture. And you also get your ideal diet plan in that one, which can tell you what style of eating is best for you. So, I like to tell people if you're easily overwhelmed or if you kind of already feel like you have it figured out and you don't need a lot of foundational knowledge, go with the Age Like a Badass report. But if you feel like you really need to get a good grasp on who you are and you're feeling confused or you're feeling conflicted about all the things you should be doing, then go with the foundational Mind Body Genes blueprint because that'll give you the map. And you can always add future panels on later. You don't ever have to re-swab your cheek. It's a one and done test. You can add on advanced panels later. It's never something that you have to like keep spending money on testing because it's your blueprint for life.
That is super cool. And you have been so kind to make a discount code for my listeners. Do you want to share about that?
Yes, yes. So I do have two different codes. Depending on what you are looking for, you can get any blueprint with the code MBG, which stands for Mind Body Genes, and that's going to give you $200 off any blueprint, those two that I mentioned. And then the code for certifying yourself as a practitioner that can do these for your clients if you're somebody in the wellness space, in the health space, and wants to run genetic blueprints on your clients or even family and friends and yourself, right? That's how I started. You can get $1,000 off of our certification program by using the code Gene Queen. And that is the biggest discount we have out there. And I'm super excited to share it with your audience.
Thank you so much. I will link all of that in the show notes in case you're driving or walking. And so it's all there for you. And
Awesome.
that is fascinating. And thank you so much for sharing that. That is really, really wonderful and so generous. What did you do before you were in genetics?
Oh, yeah, that is a great question. So I was in the hospitality business for my entire life since I was 15. So I started working in restaurants and then I ended up getting my degree in hospitality and food and wine. And I studied everything there was. I had a really heavy emphasis on food science. And so I kind of got a little obsessed with nutrition back in my college days, but I stayed in restaurants, which is not the highly nutrition, it's not usually where you find a lot of nutrition. but gosh, I had all my babies while I was working in restaurants. I ended up getting out of restaurants, but staying within the hospitality industry and doing training programs for large corporations, so large hospitality groups. Loved teaching, loved all of that. So I took that and I merged into that. After I had Della, my baby, it was the first time I didn't work after I had her because I had 3 kids. And all of a sudden I was like, we just can't do that. It's a lot, right? My husband had a 80-hour-a-week job. And so I decided that's when my health started talking to me. That's when my body went, okay, now that you have time to rest, we're going to start talking to you about all these years that you've spent, grinding and just working yourself to death, basically. So my healing journey started then. It was 2018. Then I decided, I will always have a passion for people. I'll always have a passion for teaching. And now I've really relit the flame on my passion for nutrition and health and wellness. So that's when I decided, like, okay, you're going to do this. You're going to figure out your own path and you're going to do something that there's not really something to follow out there. You got to like kind of trailblaze this a little bit. And that was exciting to me.
And then how do you use your empathic abilities in your practice?
Oh gosh, this is a great question and I have a good answer because I often get this question from coaches. They're like, "So, could I just record the sessions and like send it out to my clients?" And I was like, "Absolutely, if that is your style." My style and how I use it with clients is I have to be with them. Like we can be over Zoom, but I need to be with them because my abilities as an empath really allow me to understand what it is they need. I've gotten on countless calls where we're supposed to talk about nutrition and we end up talking about their old patterns from a standpoint. You would love this from a standpoint of like inner child stuff or how they were raised, because that is what they need at the moment. And it's my ability to like know that is something that I do consider a superpower at this point. Whereas
Absolutely.
I would have looked at that as a weakness before, like, oh, I just feel so much. I just feel other people's energies. And like, I get, if somebody's sad, I get sad. If somebody's upset, it makes me upset. But now I'm like, that's a superpower because you have the ability to help others based on what you're able to feel. And I need
Mhm.
to be in front of people to do that, right? It's just, it's how it is. I need to see their face, I need to see their facial expressions. And so I love doing the one-on-one coaching sessions where we deep dive into their genes. We usually spend about an hour and a half together on their genes. And that's how I usually use those superpowers.
How do you feel like being an empath has helped you in your parenting?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I feel like in some ways in my early days it made it harder, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I didn't know yet. And when my babies were little, I was so stressed out. Like you, I would just feel everything so deeply. And so I mean their whole existence is to need you. And so that was kind of exhausting because you're just like I am existing so that like this person needs me so much, right? I didn't know how to take care of myself back then. So, what I've learned, fast forward to now, my youngest is 7. What I've learned since knowing that I am an empath, it has changed the way that I parent them because I realized that I am not going to be able to give them what they need unless I am giving myself what I need. And so it allowed me to pour back into myself. And now I'm very proud to say that they can grow up knowing I have a mom who prioritizes taking care of herself. I grew up seeing no one resting. I grew up seeing my grandmother and my mother never sitting down, like never ever taking a minute, right? That was the culture, that was how they were raised, right? So my kids know like I have my rituals, I have my things that I do, and they love it. But what's also cool is they will mirror that too. And I will see my daughter be like, I think I need to take a bath tonight. I think I need a relaxing bath. And she's 7, she's in second grade. And then I'll have my son be like, he's full blown in teenager testosterone land. And he is more so like learning how to deal with all these hormones. And he'll be like, okay, I need to move my body. Like, I need to do a workout. I need to like, so it's different. They all need different things. And my middle son, Desmond, he is an empath through and through. Like, he is a feeler, a lover, a hugger. And I know that. And even as an empath, I'm not a very touchy person. I'm not a very, like, I'm not a hugger. I'm not a cuddler with most people other than my husband. And so when he needs that, I truly remind myself, like, okay, he needs this right now from you. Like, this is an important thing. And so even though it doesn't feel as comfortable for me to be such a snuggler, cuddler, I know that my kids each need something different for their own unique selves. And so that's really made me a better parent. It's not a one size fits all.
And that is so huge because I often think, even if I'll hear this from other parents or the generation, especially that you and I were raised, is like, treat everybody the same. It has to all be the same. It has to all be fair. It has to all be equal. But
Yeah.
the problem with that is that we are all individual and we actually do all need to be met where we're at, and that will look different. And so thinking about that with my own kids, what my son needs is different than what my daughter needs, and that's okay. But so my
Absolutely.
kids are 4 years apart, a boy and a girl, and they still want everything the same. They want like, if my daughter has a pink cup, then my son wants a pink cup. And if my son has a blue cup, then my daughter wants a blue cup. And they want everything the
Yeah.
same. And so we try to explain to them we are all different. We're different ages. Our bodies are different. You might need this and this person might need that. And I think it's such an important thing to teach them young that you
Yeah.
can. So one of the things my kids will say is like, I'm listening to my body, mom, and I'm full. And so there's a part of me as a parent that's like, oh my God, just eat your food. But then there's
Yeah.
the other part of me that's like, good job. I'm glad that
Good
you are
job.
doing that. Yes. That's great that you're listening to your body. You don't have to eat anymore. And if you don't eat your protein, then there's no dessert. You
Absolutely.
can be. You can be full. Good job listening to your body. So then now my son will say, I'm full of this. Mom, my body's telling me that I'm full of this, but it's telling me that there's still room for dessert.
Yeah. My body is telling me I need dessert. So I'm hearing, I'm listening.
But you know what? He's being honest.
It's
And
being
so
honest.
then I'm like, that's a good thing. The fact that he's being honest, that he's like, I don't want any more protein, but I do still want dessert. And it's like, well, that's
Mhm.
actually the truth. And that's you tuning into your body. And sometimes parenting these super self aware kids is tricky.
It
it's
is
what
very tricky.
it's what we want for them. It's what we want for them as in their adult life is to really truly know themselves. And it's, comes at we have to constantly pivot, I find, as parents. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Constantly pivoting, especially as they age and they grow up, because what your child wanted at 10 is so different than what your child wants and needs at 14. And their interests change. And so it is, you're constantly being flexible. But yeah, at the end of the day, just being able to look at them and go, like, we're doing our best. And we are breaking some of these cycles and we are learning together. And we are a lot better than previous generations at repairing things now, and I feel like that's beautiful, but it's also healing those other generations too. Like, I know that our parents age, they look at that and go, that is really different than the way we raised our kids, but it's working. They're
And do you
seeing it.
And do you find they're often triggered by it? Like my parents' generation, where they'll be like, "Oh, that's not how I do it." They're like
They
cringing.
can, yes, yes, they can be triggered by it for sure. Like, my dad's coming over tonight, and it's funny. He's so great, and it's so funny how he is with the grandkids. I actually was more triggered by the way that my parents started showing up as grandparents, because I was like, this is so different than the way you were a parent. Like, I would never be allowed to do that, because they just kind of, they allow their grandkids to, let's, oh yeah, eat all the things, get all the toys. Oh, let's take you to Target and buy like a million things. And I'm going like, oh my gosh. But what's funny is I think both sides get a little triggered, because we're like, that's not how we were raised, or you would have never done that with us. And we realize they've evolved too. They're different now than they were back then. My mom and dad as a parent to me is a totally different person as a grandparent to my kids. And that's wonderful.
It's good.
Um, so I'm
It's
sure they
growth.
do. It's growth, and I'm sure they do get triggered sometimes by being like, "Oh my gosh, we would have never done that." I'm like, "Oh, we wouldn't have."
Well, and I find my biggest triggers are as a parent myself is that I tend to overreact and get triggered by things that my kids do that I wasn't allowed to do if I
Oh
was shut
yes.
down for those things. And so then like you were talking about repair, which is the most important parenting tool that I have in my toolbox, which is when I lose my temper or I overreact to something, which I do because I'm human, even though before I had kids, I swore I never would. I swore I would
Oh,
never
of
raise my voice,
course.
I would never yell, but it happens. And what I've realized through the work that I do is the trauma comes from kids thinking that it's their fault. That's where the trauma happens. So if we're able to say, so if I yell and I say to my kid afterwards, I'm really sorry that I yelled. That was my fault, not your fault. I yelled. You did nothing to deserve that. I'm really sorry. And it absolves them of the responsibility of thinking that they are now responsible for my reactions and feelings, which just isn't true. I am always responsible for yelling. Always. It is never, nobody can make me yell. That is a reaction that comes out of my nervous system. So I have found that that is the biggest thing in my parenting that has made the biggest difference is just understanding that trauma comes from thinking it's your fault.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I see it even in my son, because he will have an outburst where he will yell. Like, now it's the power struggle of having a teenager in the house. And because he has seen us do that same thing where we repair and we go back and we say, we're sorry, we shouldn't have yelled, that's my fault. You taught me that. He will now say things like, I'm really sorry. And then I'm like, okay, now my job as the parent is to say, I will always forgive you. You're a human. You
Mm.
yelled at me and you said some mean things, but I will always forgive you. I will never hold on to that. So that he knows also that's not his responsibility, right? Like, he doesn't feel bad about yelling at me because he's my kid, right?
That's so huge. And that's again, the mirror neurons working for our benefit, where you got to model claiming your own mistake to him. And now he's able to do the same. And I always say to my son, you will never get in trouble for telling the truth. But then I have to really back that up. If he tells me the truth and it's something that pisses me off or I don't like,
Something you don't want to hear. Yeah.
I have to make sure that my response matches what I told him so that he knows I will always keep my promises, and that creates safety. A lot of moms that are empaths tend to put everybody before themselves.
Mhm.
So if you had a mom who also has children Who should get their genetic blueprint done first, the mom or the kids?
The mom.
And
The
why is
mom.
that?
And because I always, and it usually happens this way too in practice. It usually happens because the moms, what they'll learn is that they need to understand it first and be able to put it into practice. It's almost like learning how, I mean, it is exactly the same as the analogy of like putting your air mask on first or whatever that is, putting your oxygen mask, learning how, like, we knew how to ride a bike before we taught our kids how to ride a bike. We knew how to do this. You have to learn how to do it in order to understand it. And then when you can get it done for your kids, you understand where it's coming from, because that's the most important part, is like you and your partner are the two pieces that make up your kids. And so if you do your kids first, you're going to be wondering, well, I wonder if that came from me or if that came from my spouse. Like, I wonder who that came from. You'll be able to see patterns once you do the whole family, which is really cool. But I always say start with the parents, start with the mama, because you're going to be the one that can really trickle that down. And a lot of the times when you're making those changes, your kids, even without their blueprints, will benefit from it because you're bringing things into the house that support you and in turn, most likely are going to support them too.
And also, once you're starting to feel better, you have more of a mental capacity to then help your kids and understand their blueprint, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to be doing that from a place of overwhelm and overburden. You want to be feeling really great yourself to be able, like, exactly what I said earlier, which was making sure that you take care of yourself so that you can show up for others in the best way you can.
Well, I know as a worrier, anything that I see in my kids, I'm like, oh my God, it's an emergency. We must fix it immediately. So then there can be
Yeah.
that feeling of like rushing to get their genetics done. I must know their entire genetics. But like you said, starting with yourself, getting healed and balanced and all that, and then having that foundation to work from for your kids, and just knowing that any benefit for you is a benefit for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Becca, is there anything in closing here that you would like to share with our listeners?
No, I'm just so excited to have this conversation. You're not alone. That's one of the things that I always like to tell people is no matter how you feel, you are not alone in this. We are all on this journey and experience together. And it's a gift to be here.
Mhm. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the discounts. I'll link all that in the show notes. And if you want to work with Becca, I will have her information in the show notes as well. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much. Thank you,
Great to see you.
Robin.
Thank you. Bye
You
now.
too. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today on The Hypnotic Empath. If this episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd follow the show, leave a 5-star review, or share with somebody who needs this kind of support. You can find more resources, hypnotherapy audios, and ways to work with me at robinhome.com. And don't forget, your sensitivity is not a weakness, it's a gift. Stay rooted in your power, and I'll see you next time.